They said the guest room was taken. That's how it started. One sentence tossed my way like a folded napkin, casual and without eye contact. You don't mind sleeping in the garage, do you? Shelley said, still scrolling on her phone, her voice syrupy sweet, like I ought to feel grateful they'd even considered a place for me. I nodded. Of course I nodded, because that's what you do when your bones ache from more than age, when you've become so good at being unnoticeable that speaking up feels like a kind of trespass. The garage, that's where they put me for Christmas. Not the couch, not a corner of the living room. The garage, next to rusted bikes and half-empty paint cans. The air reeked of rubber, old mulch, and something metallic I couldn't place. Someone had laid out a fold-out cot, the kind that dips in the middle like it's sighing under the weight of whoever it's meant for. An old blanket weighted on top, scratchy, thin. I recognized it. I'd crocheted it myself, decades ago. Orange tulips on a cream background. My stitches, once tight and quick, now loosened and tired with time. They had added a space heater, I'll give them that. A little gray cube humming bravely in the corner like a mouse trying to warm a cathedral. You'll be fine, Shelley smiled. It's just for a night. It was 19 degrees outside. I didn't argue. I just pulled the blanket tighter and lay down, knees stiff, heart stiffer. Around midnight, the heater clicked off. At 2 a.m., the air mattress deflated beneath me with a slow, whining sigh. The concrete greeted my hip like an old enemy. I curled in on myself, tried to breathe through the cold. My breath came out in little white clouds. I counted them to stay calm. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I heard it all after. Upstairs, through the insulation and wood and distance. Glasses clinking. Music. Mariah Carey. Loud and clear. A burst of applause. Someone had told a joke. Someone else toasted. They were toasting. I was trembling. I didn't cry. That's not what this is. This isn't a story about tears. It's about something colder. Something harder. It's about the moment you realize you've been erased, but you're still standing there, ghost-like, waiting for someone to notice the space you used to fill. There was a water bottle beside the cot. I reached for it, frozen solid. My hands shook, whether from the cold or something deeper. I couldn't tell. It's fine, I whispered aloud, just tonight. But even I didn't believe it. The lies stack like snow, light at first, then heavy, then impossible to move beneath. When morning came, I peeled myself off the cot like an old sticker. I stretched slow, careful. My joints popped like dry twigs. The garage door let in a sliver of orange light. It was beautiful in that cruel way winter mornings are, clear and sharp and indifferent. I made my way into the house through the side door. My son was at the table, coffee steaming in front of him, laughing at something on his phone. Shelley was plating waffles. There were berries, whipped cream, syrup in a little pitcher shaped like a maple leaf. My granddaughter wore fuzzy socks and a sleep must grin. Morning, Shelley chirped. Waffles. I opened my mouth, closed it, sat down at the end of the table with a cup of instant coffee already growing cold. No one asked how I slept, and I didn't tell them, because this wasn't my house, not anymore. It was just a place where I helped clean up wrapping paper, a place where I handed out envelopes with checks and called it love, where I smiled for family photos and was tagged as grandma. No first name, no story. But once years ago this had been my home too. I'd held my son by the fireplace when he had the flu, rocking him through the night while the wind howled outside. I hadn't slept for 2 days. He'd felt safe, loved. That fireplace is still there, still warm, but it doesn't burn for me. And if you're wondering why I didn't say something, why I didn't push back or make a scene, it's because I already knew the answer. I wasn't invited to Christmas. I was allowed to attend it. There's a difference, a big one that stretches wider than a garage in winter. And this year, for the first time, I started to feel its weight. The kitchen was too bright that morning. Not warm bright, a harsh bright. Overhead LEDs buzzing faintly, catching every smudge on the countertop, every wrinkle in the skin. I sat quietly at the edge of the breakfast bar, hands wrapped around the mug. My coffee had gone cold again. I didn't notice until I took a sip. Across the kitchen, Shelley moved with purpose, clattering plates, humming softly to herself. My son, Greg, was flipping through a news app on his tablet. Their daughter, Ellie, curled up on the couch in the living room, giggling at something on her phone. Christmas morning, the kind with a tree too symmetrical to be real and ornaments that still had price tags tucked underneath. "Is there any more cream?" I asked softly, mostly to the room. Shelley didn't look up. Probably in the garage fridge," she said it so lightly, so naturally, as if it were perfectly normal to send a 78-year-old woman back into the frozen garage for a splash of dairy. I hesitated. Greg didn't glance up. "There's almond milk in the main fridge, Mom." "I'm fine," I said quickly, setting the mug down. "It's just coffee." Shelley turned then, mid-swipe with a cloth. "I mean, you're used to it black, right?" I nodded. Not because it was true, but because it was easier than explaining that I hadn't taken my coffee black since 1976. Since James brought home that little hand-painted creamer dish from the flea market. The one I used every morning for 40 years, chipped now at the rim, tucked away in a cupboard no one opened. They meant well. I told myself that, like a hymn I didn't quite believe in anymore. "I hope the garage wasn't too bad last night," Shelley added breezily. "We tried to make it cozy. Put that heater in there and everything." "It was a broken bar fine," I said. The word tasted like dust. Shelley smiled, that tight-lipped kind that ends before it reaches the eyes, and went back to wiping down surfaces that didn't need cleaning. Her movements were sharp, efficient, just like everything else she did. Efficient dinners, efficient greetings, efficient boundaries. I looked at my hands, pale, slightly swollen at the knuckles, the veins like rivers on an old map. Once, these hands had sewn Halloween costumes, bandaged knees, stirred cocoa on snow days. Now they just trembled a little when I reached for the spoon. Ellie wandered into the kitchen then, her hair a wild halo of curls. She leaned against her mother, still giggling at whatever was on her phone. "Mom, Aunt June posted another Christmas throwback. Look, it's from like the 90s or something. Grandma's in it. She looks so young." I turned my head slightly, trying to see. Shelley glanced at the screen. "Oh wow, look at her hair." Ellie grinned. "You looked kinda cool back then, Grandma." Back then, the words were innocent. Kind. Even. But they landed wrong, or maybe they landed exactly right. I smiled. The kind of smile you practice in bathroom mirrors. "Thank you, sweetheart." Shelley stepped back, wiping her hands on a towel. "Ellie, go get dressed. We're doing family pictures before brunch." Should I change too?" I asked. Greg finally looked up. "Pictures are mostly for the kids this year, Mom. You know how Shelley's thing is aesthetic matching." I blinked. "I brought that burgundy sweater you like." A broken bar. Shelley waved her hand. No, we're doing whites and creams. But don't worry, we'll get one with you after." "Maybe in front of the tree?" "Sure," I said, too softly. They were already gone. Shelley, ushering Ellie upstairs. Greg, back to his tablet. I sat there, in my robe. The one I'd worn for a decade. The one James had given me our last Christmas together, a blue, thick, embroidered with a little sprig of holly on the cuff. I touched the sleeve lightly. The fabric was thinning, but it still felt like him. I wanted to say something, to ask if I could just be in the background, if I could stand behind the couch, smile for one photo, just to mark the day. But I didn't, because I already knew what the photo would look like. Perfect smiles, matching tones, the illusion of harmony, a picture that would hang in a hallway or get sent to coworkers, the kind where I'd be the one holding the camera, not the one in the frame. A few minutes later, Shelley's voice floated down the stairs. "Greg, can you grab the tripod from the hall closet?" I stood quietly and went to refill my mug with hot water. No cream, no sugar, just heat. It was enough. In the other room, laughter, buzzing, clicks of the shutter. Greg telling Ellie to tuck in her shirt. Shelley fixing her hair in the reflection of the TV. I sipped my bitter coffee, still standing, still smiling. The first real dismissal never comes with shouting. It's not an argument or a slammed door. It's a moment in the kitchen. A gesture too small to name. A silence where a question should have been. A photo you're not in. And the worst part? You almost miss it. After the photos were taken and the noise settled into that post-brunch lull, the kind where everyone drifts into different corners of the house, full and distracted, I cleared the table. No one asked me to. No one noticed I had. I stacked the plates in silence, scraping half-eaten waffles and syrup pools into the bin. The dishwasher was already half full, so I finished it, ran it, wiped the crumbs from the counter where Greg had rested his coffee mug and forgotten it. I found a spoon stuck to the bottom of the sink with dried whipped cream and scrubbed it clean. Shelley passed through once, phone in hand, Bluetooth earbud in. She smiled, not at me, past me. Thanks, she murmured absently, not waiting for a reply. Later, they all settled in the living room to watch some holiday movie I didn't recognize, something animated, loud, full of jokes that didn't quite land. There wasn't room on the couch, not in the physical sense that would have been easy to fix, but in the other sense, the real one. I knew the layout before I even walked in. Ellie curled up between her parents, a throw blanket over her knees, Greg with his arm around her shoulder, Shelley tucked in on the end, legs curled under her. The dog, even, had claimed his place. The good seats were spoken for, so I sat in the armchair off to the side, the one that faced the television at an awkward angle, and squeaked if you shifted too much. No one said a word. I folded my hands in my lap, let the movie play, didn't ask questions, didn't interrupt, just smiled when someone laughed, even though I couldn't hear the joke. At one point, Ellie asked for hot cocoa. Greg called out, "Mom, is there any of that cocoa mix left from last year?" I stood up, went to the pantry, found the tin I'd bought, still unopened. I made it, added a pinch of cinnamon the way Ellie used to like, brought it in quietly, set it down on the coffee table. "Thanks," Ellie mumbled, eyes still on the screen. She didn't see me smile. They didn't see me leave the room. It's not the big moments that break you, it's the quiet, cumulative erosion. The way your chair at the table is set last, and only after someone remembers. The way you refill the toilet paper roll, and no one thanks you. The way your name is spoken only when there's something to be done, not for the sake of saying it. I had a drawer in the guest bathroom. That's what Shelley called it. The guest bathroom, not Grandma's bathroom, not the bathroom off your room. The drawer had my toothbrush, my lotion, my pillbox. A single drawer, neat, functional, out of sight. The guest amenities. I had no photos in this house, not one, none on the walls, none on the mantel, not even a magnet on the fridge with my face on it. There were baby pictures, school portraits, one of Shelley and Greg in Paris, but not me. I'd lived here, once. Not this house, but the one before, the one Greg was born into, the one with the yellow kitchen and the leaky faucet James could never fix, the house where I hosted 12 Christmases, made 9 birthday cakes, burned 1 turkey and never heard the end of it. That house had walls that knew my name, this one did not. After dinner, a ham, overcooked, dry. Shelley passed around the pie. She didn't ask if I wanted any, just plated 3 slices, handed them out, and walked back to the kitchen. I got my own, cut a smaller piece, ate it standing at the counter. Greg wandered in, opened the fridge, sighed. "Do we still have any cider left?" I pointed to the bottle behind the salad container. "You might want to warm it a bit. It's cold from the fridge." He nodded. Didn't say thank you. Ellie called from the other room. "Dad, we're doing that TikTok thing, are you coming?" Greg grinned and left his glass on the counter. I rinsed it, washed it, dried it. That night, I lay on the cot in the garage again. They'd added another blanket, bless them. Shelley must have realized a heater wasn't enough. It was one of those metallic emergency blankets, shiny, crinkly, more sound than substance. "It reflects your body heat," she'd said proudly. I wanted to tell her, my body has none left to reflect, but I didn't. Instead, I wrapped it around my shoulders like tinfoil dignity and looked at the tiny window above the lawn equipment. Frost crept along the glass in branching veins. Beautiful. Cold. I didn't sleep much. The water bottle by the cot froze again. I tried not to shiver too loudly. In the morning, when I walked back into the house, Shelley was already bustling. Pancakes this time. I'd brought in a small tray of cookies I'd made the week before, sugar, with red sprinkles. Left them on the counter beside the toaster. At breakfast, no one touched them. At lunch, They were gone. I found the Tupperware in the trash under a plate of eggshells and orange peels. No one said a word, because that's how you disappear. Not in one moment, not in a blaze of heartbreak. You disappear in the quiet skipping of your name on a gift tag, in the way your mug is pushed to the back of the cabinet, in the fact that no one knows how you take your coffee anymore. They don't stop loving you all at once, they just stop looking at you with the kind of love that includes you. That's what erasure looks like, and I was learning slowly, painfully that you don't have to be locked out of a house to be left outside of a family. You just have to stop being seen. It was the fireplace that did it. The one in the living room, a gas-powered now, sleek and clean. Shelley had decorated the mantel with white candles, pine cones, and matching gold stockings. It looked like a magazine cover, untouched, untouchable. But when the flame flickered on that night, casting a soft orange glow across the floor, something in me reached backward to another room, another fire, another Christmas. It was 1989, a year when the heater had groaned like an old man and the snow came early and hard. Greg had been 9 years old, dull elbows and runny noses and that cowlick that refused to lay flat no matter how I wet it down. He'd caught the flu just days before Christmas, could barely keep soup down. The doctor had said rest and fluids, so that's what I gave him. For 4 days, I barely slept. He curled up on the couch in the den, wrapped in James's old robe. I kept the fire going even when the house felt like an oven, kept a washcloth on his forehead, made jello in 3 colors just to see if one would stay down. On the second night, I woke up to coughing, found Greg in the living room, knees tucked to his chest, staring at the embers. "Mom," he whispered, "can I sleep out here?" Of course. I brought out extra blankets, the ones I'd saved for guests. Though we never had many, I lay down on the carpet beside the couch, pillow under my head, one hand reaching up to hold his. "I don't want you to get sick," he said. I laughed. "Moms don't get sick." He smiled at that, eyes heavy. "You're like a fireplace, always warm." I remember that, clearer than I remember what I ate yesterday. "You're like a fireplace." That boy, my boy, knew I was his home. Later, when he was feeling better, he made me a card with crooked letters and a glued-on macaroni wreath. I still have it somewhere, in the cedar chest, maybe, wrapped in tissue beside old school programs and a photo of him in his prom tux, pretending to hate the but unye tilde die irises re. He used to ask me to be there, wanted me close. His little hands would tug mine in grocery store parking lots, or slip under the table at dinner, looking for the reassurance that I was still there. Even as a teenager, he came to me when the world felt big. When his best friend moved away, when he crashed the car, when his heart got broken for the first time, and I was always there. Not out of duty, out of love, out of instinct, because that's what mothers do. Not just when the child is small, but when they forget they still need you. I remembered one night, he must have been 17. He came home later than usual, his face blotchy, red. I met him at the door, no questions, just opened my arms. He cried into my shoulder, held me like a child again, that kind of shaking, silent cry that only comes when you believe someone is a safe place. That night, he said, "I'm so glad I have you." I've replayed those words in my head like an old song. Now I'm not sure he remembers ever saying them. The day after that memory returned to me, I wandered through their kitchen while they were all out shopping. Shelley had taken Ellie for last-minute gifts. Greg had gone for a run. I wasn't invited. I dusted the shelves, not because they were dirty, but because it gave my hands something to do. I found the old mixing bowl I'd given them when they got married. Ceramic, sky blue. It was tucked behind a row of protein powder tubs and chia seeds. I ran my hand along its rim. That bowl had made every birthday cake Greg had as a child. It had seen more flour, sugar, and spilled vanilla than any item in their kitchen now. It was still there, but like me, it hadn't been used in a long time. After lunch, Shelley asked Ellie if she wanted to watch a movie. "Just us girls," she said brightly. I opened my mouth, closed it. They left the room without a glance. So, I sat at the table alone and read the newspaper a week old. left folded on the counter. On the back was an ad for a fireplace insert. It promised warmth, efficiency, elegance. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger. James had once fixed our chimney himself, up on the roof with a flashlight in his mouth and soot on his cheeks. "You deserve warmth, Mary," he said, brushing ash from his hands. "No one calls me Mary anymore, just Grandma, or nothing." I stood up, moved to the window, and watched the wind stir the bare trees. My reflection stared back, a faint, grayed out, like the ghost of someone I used to be. For a moment, I imagined myself sitting in that old den, carpet under my knees, holding my son's fevered hand. He trusted me, he saw me. Now he hands me a key and says I can use the side door at night if I need the bathroom. No hallway lights for me, no warm welcome if I wake, just a metal key, cold and impersonal, like the garage it unlocks. That's the real contrast, not the fireplace, not the cocoa, not the photos on the wall. It's the way I've gone from being the warmth in his world to being someone they keep warm with a plug-in heater, just enough to call it kindness, not enough to call it care. And I wonder, quietly, painfully, when did I stop being the fireplace and become the attic insulation? Forgotten, but still expected to keep things from getting too cold. It was the third day of Christmas week. The snow had stopped, and the light outside had softened that gentle winter gold that makes everything look kinder than it really is. I woke early, before anyone else. The garage was dark and hushed. The heater had stayed on most of the night, a small mercy. I could still see my breath in the air, but it didn't feel like punishment, just silence, a silence I'd grown used to. I dressed slowly, rubbing warmth into my hands, slipping on the scarf James had given me 20 Christmases ago. Faded now, the wool gone a little threadbare, but still soft where it counted. I crept into the house through the side door and stood for a moment in the kitchen. It was still, just the hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the stove clock. I made coffee, not the instant kind this time, real coffee. Ground beans from the tin above the stove, the ones Greg liked. I used the French press, I'd bought them last year, still in its box in the back of the cupboard. I unpacked it carefully, measured everything just right. I warmed the mugs. I even set the table, nothing elaborate, just 3 places: Greg's, Shelley's, and mine. A small pot of jam, toast, already buttered, the cinnamon rolls I'd hidden in my bag, bought from that old bakery near June's house, still fresh. I'd wrapped them in foil, saved them for a morning like this, a hopeful morning. By the time the sun had risen, the kitchen smelled like sugar and comfort. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt it again, the possibility that maybe today would be different, that maybe they'd sit, eat, smile. Maybe Greg would thank me, maybe Shelley would laugh and ask about the recipe. Maybe we'd just be people around a table, not roles orbiting obligation. I set the last mug down and sat quietly, waited. At 7:45, I heard movement upstairs, water running, a door closing, then footsteps. Greg appeared first, shirt wrinkled, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He stopped in the doorway. "Morning," I said, gently. "Thought I'd make something warm." He blinked at the table. "Oh, that's a broken bar, thanks, Mom. But I've got a Zoom meeting in 10, just gonna grab something quick." He walked past me, poured cereal into a bowl, added almond milk, and stood by the counter, spooning it absently. Shelley came in next, already dressed. She glanced at the spread. "Oh wow, did you a broken bar?" I nodded. "Smells great," she said lightly. "I'm doing intermittent fasting, though. Maybe later." She took a vitamin, filled a glass of water, kissed Greg's cheek. "Don't forget Hallie's skating lesson," she murmured. He nodded. Neither sat, neither picked up a fork, neither asked if I'd like to eat with them. I watched as Greg rinsed his bowl and Shelley scrolled through her phone. The cinnamon rolls sat untouched, the jam congealed slightly at the edge. I didn't say anything, not because I was afraid to, because I already knew the answer. Ellie came downstairs 10 minutes later, saw the food. "Ooh, who made these?" Before I could speak, Greg said, "Grandma got up early." She smiled, picked one up, took a bite mid-step. "Thanks," she called, already halfway to the coat closet. "We're leaving in 5, right?" Shelley answered yes. Greg glanced at the clock. "Sorry, "Mom, we'll clean up later." But I was already gathering plates, folding napkins, rinsing cups that hadn't been used. The coffee pot still full, still hot, still waiting. I poured it into a thermos and set it in the fridge. Maybe June would like some. They left with kisses for Allie, coats half zipped, a flurry of busyness. The door closed behind them. I sat again, at the table now stripped bare, the chairs across from me still warm from air, not presence, and I felt it, that tiny flicker from earlier, the one that had dared to hope, snuffed, not with malice, not even intentionally, just forgotten, like the jam, like the scarf, like the woman who used to be the fireplace, because hope doesn't always die with a bang, sometimes it dies quietly in a bright kitchen, with warm coffee, and no one to share it with, and that, somehow, hurts more. It wasn't one moment, not a single thing I could point to and say, "That's when it broke." No door slammed, no voices raised, no final, cruel word. It was everything, and it was nothing. The slow kind of forgetting, the quiet kind of removal. That afternoon, they gave me a key, not to the house. I already had one of those. No, this was to the side door, the one near the garage, beside the trash bins. Greg handed it to me after lunch, as casually as someone passing a napkin. "Just in case you need the bathroom at night," he said, not looking up from his phone. I took it, that small, silver rectangle pressed into my palm like a verdict. They weren't cruel. I keep telling myself that. They didn't mean harm. They just didn't think that a woman who once wiped vomit from their lips, who stayed up through the fevers, who stitched Halloween costumes by hand and cheered through school recitals, might feel something about being told gently to use the side door if nature called. The guest bathroom was just off the main hall, warm, clean, stocked with lavender soap, but that wasn't for me. My bathroom was now down a short path of concrete, through the frost, under the motion sensor light that buzzed loudly when it flickered on. Like it needed to announce me. "She's coming inside. Don't worry, she won't stay." I sat on the cot that evening, the emergency blanket wrapped around my shoulders like a foil apology. The heater wheezed. I watched my breath fog in the air, little ghosts of my own making. I hadn't spoken all day, not really, not more than a few words. Polite things, soft things. I'd become very good at softness, soft voice, soft steps, soft smiles, so soft I wasn't even there anymore. I looked down at my hands, the skin paper thin, a map of work and care and time. Once, they were the first hands Greg ever held. They rocked him to sleep, cut the crusts off sandwiches, clapped for him when he sang off-key in the 4th grade talent show. Now, they opened Tupperware, dusted high shelves, accepted keys to side doors. I thought of James. If he'd been here, none of this would have happened. He'd have said something, laughed too loud, pulled me in close at the dinner table. He had that way of making a room acknowledge me, as if love wasn't a given, it was a declaration. I missed him then, so suddenly, so sharply. I pressed my fingers to my face to hold it all in. There are certain kinds of sadness that live below language. This was one of them. Not anger, not even grief, just depletion. I had nothing left, not to give, not to explain, not to hope. I had been erased, not maliciously, not even purposefully, but completely. I was the extra chair, the afterthought, the one you put in the garage, like seasonal decorations, out of sight, out of season. And I was tired, so tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind that lives in your bones, in your memory, in the way your name isn't written on any of the gift tags under the tree. That night, I didn't cry. I wish I had. Crying means something in you still believes it can be healed, that it matters enough to hurt. But I'd gone quiet inside. There's a line no one talks about, the one between pain and peace. And if you walk far enough into pain, sometimes it mimics peace, stillness, a quiet so complete it feels like rest, but it's not. It's surrender. And I was there, in that silver blanketed cot, beside the frozen water bottle, with the key to a bathroom tucked into the pocket of my sweater. That was my rock bottom, not because anyone yelled at me, but because no one even noticed I was cold. That's when you know you don't need to be hated to feel discarded. Sometimes being invisible is worse, because at least hatred is proof you still occupy space. But me, I had become air, something to walk through, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that the drafts weren't cutting through me. The moment didn't arrive with a bang, it came, instead, like a breath, soft, inward, final. It was early evening, the day before Christmas, the kind of cold that hums beneath the skin, not sharp enough to startle but steady enough to wear you down. I'd spent the afternoon folding wrapping paper scraps, rinsing pie tins, sweeping the kitchen floor while Shelley debated centerpieces for the dining table. They hadn't asked me to help, but the mess was there, and I was there, and I'd always believed you tend to the things no one else does. That's how families stay whole. At dusk, Greg handed me a bag of recycling and nodded toward the bins near the garage. "Thanks, Mom," he said, not unkindly, not even impatiently, just a broken bar absently, like I was part of the wallpaper, reliable, decorative, background. I nodded and stepped outside. The wind bit harder than I'd expected. I pulled the bag close to my chest and crossed the icy patch near the steps with careful feet. The bins loomed ahead, a blue, plastic, indifferent. I opened the lid and dropped the bag in, and that's when it happened. Not a fall, not a shout, just a sound, a faint, sharp, unmistakable, the crack of something small and hollow. I looked down. My water bottle, the one I'd kept by the cot, it must have fallen from my coat pocket, cracked on the concrete. The water inside had frozen solid again. I bent to pick it up, fingers stiff with cold. That's when I felt it in my knees, in my back, in my heart. "This is not what love looks like." The words arrived quietly. I wasn't angry, I wasn't heartbroken, I was a broken bar, done, not with them, not entirely, but with waiting, with hoping someone else would remember who I used to be, who I still was. I stood there, the cracked bottle in my hand, the winter air threading itself into the folds of my scarf. I looked at the house, lights glowing in the windows, silhouettes laughing in the kitchen, the sound of Mariah Carey spinning again from upstairs. And I realized something. They were fine without me, not cruel, not malicious, just fine. And I was not fine. I was freezing in a borrowed coat, holding a broken bottle like a question I'd asked too many times. What had I become? Not the woman who once stitched quilts by hand, not the mother who stayed awake through every cough, not the friend who remembered birthdays and baked until her wrists ached, just someone who quietly accepted less and less until it became nothing. And suddenly, I wanted more, not from them, from myself, from the hours I had left. However many there were. I turned and walked back to the garage, slower than usual, but steadier. I opened the door, sat on the cot, held the broken bottle in my lap like a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. Something had shifted, not loudly, not outwardly, but inside. A door opened, one I hadn't touched in years. Tomorrow, I thought, as I wrapped the scarf around my shoulders. Tomorrow, I would decide. Tonight, I would rest, but not in defeat, in preparation, because when a heart finally stops whispering for permission, it begins to listen to itself again. And mine had started to speak. The house was full of music again, not the kind I liked, not carols sung around a piano, not choirs on the radio. This was the loud, glossy kind. Mariah Carey again. A Spotify playlist Shelley had queued up on the smart speaker. Every few songs, the music cut out for an ad. No one seemed to mind. They were gathered in the living room, laughing too loudly, phones aimed at one another. Ellie was filming a dance. Shelley was fluffing a pillow before each take. Greg tried to mimic the moves but kept forgetting the steps. They all roared when he knocked over the stocking holder. I stood in the hallway, just outside the frame. No one saw me. That wasn't new. But what was new, what changed, was that I didn't feel hurt by it this time. I felt clear. They weren't cruel. They weren't even distant. They were just a broken bar wrapped in their own lives, their own moments, and I had wrapped myself around them for so long, hoping to still belong, that I'd forgotten I had any shape of my own. But last night, had the broken water bottle, the key to the bathroom, the warmth that never came. It had given me something back, not joy, not anger, choice. So, while they sang along and danced badly and captured themselves in ways that would vanish in 24 hours, I returned to the garage, not hiding, not sulking, just a broken bar gathering. I moved slowly, folding the few things I'd brought: a sweater, my book, a pair of socks with threadbare heels. I set aside the scarf, James's scarf, and brushed it gently before laying it on top of the bag. Then I reached into the pocket of my coat, pulled out the old tin. It was dented, corners rusted slightly, lid askew. But inside were photographs, tiny ones, wallet-sized, of Greg as a boy, Ellie at 5, missing her front teeth, James, in that ridiculous Santa hat he wore every year without fail, and one of me, a younger, laughing, standing in a kitchen I no longer lived in, holding a pie that had just come out of the oven. I stared at that photo the longest, because she still looked like me, not erased, not extra, just a broken bar central. I held the tin close, then zipped it into my bag. I wasn't running away, not exactly. I was stepping out of the frame, and the one they'd made without room for me, and into one of my own. Back inside, they were singing now, "Deck the Halls," off-key but enthusiastic. I waited until the music swelled, then opened the garage door and slipped down the hallway. I paused once at the side table. There, beside a bowl of peppermint candies, sat the Christmas cards, the ones they hadn't mailed yet. I flipped through. Not one had my name on it, so I took a small square of paper from my coat pocket, something I'd written in the early morning hours, when I couldn't sleep. I placed it gently on top of the stack. It said only, "Thanks for the space, I found better." Then I opened the front door. Cold air met my face, crisp and bracing. I didn't flinch, I didn't hesitate. I stepped outside, pulled the scarf tighter, and walked down the front steps. Not rushed, not weeping, not angry, just a broken bar. Sure. I walked toward the end of the driveway, where a familiar set of headlights waited. June, she'd texted earlier, "Come over if it gets too cold. We've got cider, and Emmett's making lasagna. You'll laugh yourself silly." I hadn't replied, but she came anyway. That's what real friends do. I opened the door and slipped into her warm car. She looked at me, said nothing, just reached across the seat and squeezed my hand, and in that quiet squeeze was more love than I'd felt in the last 3 days. As we drove away, I didn't look back, not because I was bitter, because I didn't need to. That house had stopped being mine a long time ago, but now I had a new place to go, not out of exile, out of choice. The house receded behind us like a fading photograph, lights warm in the windows, snow softened under porch lights, voices still floating faintly into the cold night. I didn't say goodbye, not because I was angry, because there was nothing left to say. June's car was filled with the smell of cinnamon and clove, a candle she kept in the console, tucked beside dog treats and extra tissues. It was the kind of scent you didn't notice until you realized you were breathing easier. She didn't ask questions, just drove, humming along with the radio, her hand resting lightly on the wheel, like this was any other ride home. When we pulled into her driveway, the porch light was already on. There was a wreath, uneven, clearly handmade, hanging slightly askew on the front door. Kids' boots lined the steps. A trail of muddy footprints led toward the kitchen. I hadn't even stepped inside yet, and I already felt more known than I had in days. Inside, the house was chaos. Laughter spilled from the living room, where 2 teenagers bickered over a board game. Someone was stirring something on the stove, loudly. A dog barked once, then settled against the radiator. June led me to the spare bedroom, where a folded blanket waited on the bed and a small handwritten card sat on the nightstand. "You're home here. No rules, no chores, just rest." That's when it hit me, not tears, just the quiet exhale of someone who'd been holding in too much air for too long. I set my bag down, took off my coat, stood still for a moment in the center of the room, unsure what to do with hands that weren't needed for anything. Then I reached into my pocket, not for my phone, for the envelope. I'd written it hours ago, before the coffee, before the key, back when I still believed I might give it to Greg in person. It wasn't long, just a note, 1 line, in my oldest, clearest handwriting. I raised you in warmth. I won't settle for cold. I added it to the card I'd left behind at the one on the side table. Just a quiet message, not a confrontation, not a plea, a boundary. The first in a very long time. Then I did something even simpler. I took off the ring, the one James had given me after Greg was born. Not my wedding ring that stayed. This was the mother's ring, gold, with Greg's birthstone. I placed it on the bedside table, looked at it, touched it once, then turned away. Not forever, not out of spite, just until it was earned back, because love, real love, is not a duty you carry through any weather. It's a light you offer and a light you deserve to stand in. And if someone puts you in the dark long enough, you don't beg, you build a fire somewhere else. In the living room, June was pouring cider. Someone called out, "Mary's here." Not Grandma, not an afterthought. Mary, me. I walked into the warmth, into noise, into arms that reached out to pull me in. And as I raised my mug in a toast I didn't expect, I knew. I hadn't left home, I'd found it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains like something sacred. Not harsh, not cold, just there, present. I lay in the guest bed for a long while, listening to the gentle clatter of dishes downstairs, the low hum of a radio playing something old and familiar. Frank Sinatra, maybe. It reminded me of Saturdays with James whistling as he read the paper, me folding towels and humming along. June had left a note on the dresser. "Take your time. There's fresh bread downstairs. No expectations, no obligations, just space, the kind you don't have to earn." When I finally made my way down, the house was alive in the real, messy, loving way. Kids argued over orange juice, a dog pawed at the back door, and June handed me a plate before I'd even spoken. "Eat," she said. "You're among the living now." I laughed. The sound surprised me. It felt like mine. We sat by the kitchen window, watching the frost melt from the grass, sun turning the cold into something almost forgiving. She passed me the butter, then leaned back and said simply, "I'm glad you came." I didn't say thank you. I just reached over, touched her hand, and let the silence speak for us. Later that day, I stepped outside. The sky was wide and blue and beautifully indifferent. I took a walk down the block, scarf tucked under my chin, coat buttoned high. No destination, just motion. My feet crunched along the sidewalk, past porches with half-deflated snowmen, past families stringing up one last row of lights. I walked slowly, not because I was tired, but because I could. There was no garage to return to, no cot to curl into like an apology, just time, just choice. At the corner, I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with a message from Greg. "We didn't mean it like that." I stared at it for a while. There was no venom in his words, but no real ownership either. That's the thing about hurt. It doesn't need to come from hate. Sometimes it comes from absence, from inattention, from love that's gone stale from lack of practice. I didn't reply, not because I was punishing him, because I was protecting me. Instead, I opened a new thread, typed a message to June. "Let's make this our tradition." Her reply came seconds later. "Already baking the next batch of cinnamon rolls." "You're bringing the cider." I smiled, slid the phone back into my coat, and kept walking. There was no final speech, no confrontation, just a woman who once gave everything a time, love, warmth, silence, and who finally remembered that her worth was not in how much she could endure, but in how fully she could choose peace. I didn't need applause. I didn't need apologies. I needed air, light, a chair at a table where I wasn't invisible. And I had it now, not because someone gave it to me, because I claimed it, quietly, completely. That is the triumph, not revenge, not spectacle, just a woman, walking into the sunlight, wrapped in her own name. Mary. Warm again, whole again, home again.